Welcome to episode 80 of the 3M Fear podcast. It was November 12th, 1945. Midi Rivers, a 74-year-old man who was an experienced hiker, disappeared. Midi was guiding a group of 4 hunters along a trail in the Glastonbury Mountains of Vermont. He knew this area very well. In fact, he had traveled it so many times that he knew it like the back of his hand. As they were heading home, near a spot called Hell Hollow Brook, Midi decided that he was going to walk ahead of the group. He told the others that he would walk ahead and reach the spot and then wait for them, and everyone agreed. By the time the others arrived at the spot, they expected to see him standing there. But unfortunately, Midi was nowhere to be found. What they found there was a single rifle cartridge. People were shocked. Why would an elderly man like Midi, who was skilled in the outdoors, vanish without a trace? This man knew everything about the place. He knew about hunting, he knew about the outdoors. How could he disappear? As per my research, he didn't have any enemies. So why would someone want to take him? And what about the small cartridge that was left behind? Did he fire his rifle at something? Was it an animal? None of these questions have ever been answered. Locals thought that Midi would show up because he knew this place very well. Maybe he just slightly missed it. Maybe he could just walk for some time and then realize that he was lost and then come back. Because after all, Midi was an outdoor person. He had very good survival skills. If he was lost in the forest, he could easily survive. He knew how to take care of himself. A massive search followed. Local volunteers, firemen, and even the US Army. The search lasted anywhere between 8 to 30 days. But Midi was never found. All they found of him was a rifle cartridge. It's as if the place had just swallowed him. Hello and welcome to the 3 AM Fear podcast. I'm Nikita Ferrao, mystery and thriller author. On this podcast, I talk about real crimes and real people. Due to the graphic nature of some of this content, listener discretion is advised. You can find the episode show notes on my website 3amfear.com. Let's get started. Imagine you're about to step into a place where people disappear without a trace. A place deep in the forests of Vermont in the United States, known as the Bennington Triangle. There is something very mysterious about this place. Between 1945 and 1950, several people went missing in this area, and no one has been able to explain what happened to them. Their stories are now part of a local legend, and the mystery surrounding their disappearance has only grown with time. The area, the Bennington Triangle, was named by author Joseph A. Citro, and it covers a quiet and isolated part of the southwestern Vermont, centered around a mountain called Glastonbury. Surrounding the mountain are old ghost towns, places like Bennington, Woodford, Shaftesbury, and Somerset. These towns were once busy with logging and industry, but over time they were abandoned, leaving behind empty buildings and overgrown paths. In 1937, the towns were officially separated, and the places were left behind by both time and people. Locals have their own idea about what might be happening. Some say the forest is so dense that it's easy for anyone to get lost and maybe never find their way out. Others have said that they have seen strange lights coming from the forests. Some even believe that there might be some supernatural at work. Maybe there is something in that forest that is taking people away. In this episode, we will go through a few of the mysterious disappearances, but there are so many more. James Tedford. James Tedford was living at a very difficult time. Even though he was older, he decided that he was going to join the army during World War II. He loved his country and he felt like it was his duty. When James was away at war, his wife, Pearl Tedford, decided to stay at their house in Vermont, waiting for him. They had a very happy, very loving relationship, and when James would come back, he knew that Pearl would be there waiting for him. And that's why this next part is even more shocking. When James returned from the war, he expected to see his wife Pearl there. But when he got home, he found something strange. The house looked just like it did when he left for war. Everything was there, even a home-cooked meal. But his wife was nowhere to be found. Her clothes, her personal things, everything was there. It wasn't as if Pearl had gone somewhere. It's just as if she disappeared. Now James was worried. He got out, he asked his neighbors, but no one had a clue. No one had seen Pearl. The only thing that he could find was that people had last seen Pearl go to the store the day that she disappeared. After that, no one knows what happened to her. Some people think that maybe they had some marital problems, that's why Pearl decided to leave. But they were both in a very happy married relationship. So it didn't seem right. Also, if she knew that she was leaving, why would she keep a home-cooked meal for James? As days passed, James became so sad that he just stopped being part of the community. He used to be a very friendly man, but after Pearl vanished, he was quiet and seemed lost in his thoughts. Friends said that he would sit for hours, just staring, waiting for his wife. By 1947, 2 years had passed since Pearl disappeared. James had tried everything to find his wife, but he couldn't. Struggling with sadness, he decided that maybe he needed to change his place. Until now, he was sitting in his house because he was hoping that one day Pearl would come back. But now 2 years had passed. He decided that he would move to Bennington, hoping that maybe this change in place could give him some form of peace. But even in his new home, he stayed quiet and alone. He couldn't forget his wife, and missing her was making him even more miserable. Even though James liked to keep to himself, he would sometimes go to visit his family at St. Albans, Vermont. To get there, he took a bus along Route 7 which passed through the Bennington Triangle, the place that was well known for strange happenings. On December 1st, 1949, during one of these trips, something strange and mysterious happened. James was visiting his family without any problems, but on his way back to Bennington, his journey took a dark turn. James got on the bus as he normally would, and on that day there were 15 other passengers with him. The bus made no unexpected stops and there seemed to be no problem in the trip. But when the bus arrived in Bennington and passengers started to get off, James was missing. His suitcase, wallet, and a bus schedule were still there on the seat, as if he had disappeared into thin air. Neither of the passengers nor the bus driver remembered seeing him get off the bus. There was no sign of any struggle or noise. It was as if James vanished into thin air. His disappearance shocked everyone. A search was started for James, but unfortunately, he was never found. Now, according to these theories, no one saw James get off the bus. Now, one of these theories, which I believe is a crazy theory, is that some sort of a portal opened up and James got into the portal in the middle of the ride. Now, if this is true, why no one saw him, I don't know, but it seems to be a crazy theory. Many also think that this could be somehow linked to his wife's disappearance because his wife also disappeared in a similar way. Not that she disappeared in front of multiple people, but she did disappear and she was never found. And James also to this day is never found. No one knows what happened to Pearl and James. But this next story is even more strange and creepy. Robert Singley. Robert Singley was one of the very few people who could escape the Bennington Triangle. He lived to tell the tale. In 2008, a 27-year-old student named Robert Singley, who loved hiking and music, had a very strange experience at the Bennington Triangle. Now, Robert was trying to work on his PhD in music and he wanted some inspiration. And his best inspiration came from nature. That's when he decided that he would go on a solo hike in the mountains of this mysterious area. On September 28, Robert started his hike around noon. He dressed warmly and carried a headlamp, but he did not bring with him a compass, GPS or map. He knew the trails very well, so he was sure that if he went on this hike, he could easily come back. He knew this path, he could never miss it. After reaching the top of the Bald Mountain and having lunch, he decided that it was time for him to come back. He started walking down the trail, the same trail that he walked up. But as he was walking, he realized something was different. This path was not the one that he took. At first, Robert wasn't that worried. He thought maybe he just missed a path, so he would try again. But as he went deeper and deeper, he realized he was lost. And that's when he started panicking. He felt confused and dizzy. He was tired. He had been walking for so long, but he still had no idea where he was. And darkness began to fall. Robert started to feel as if he was in a very strange place, as if he was in a different dimension, not in this world at all. Nothing seemed normal to him. Now it is said that some people believe that the Bennington Triangle might have paranormal energy or some time-space anomalies. Like you feel as if you're not in this place when you're in this place. Something like that. To make matters worse, his headlamp stopped working and now he had absolutely no idea where he was going. And unfortunately for him, he didn't bring anything with him, especially a compass to show him his way back. No compass, no GPS, nothing. It started to rain and Robert realized that if he didn't do something fast, then he was in danger of freezing to death. He found shelter under a maple tree and he decided that he would try everything possible to stay warm and sleep the night. Meanwhile, Robert's girlfriend was worried when he didn't return home. She contacted the police and they found his car at the trailhead. But the search was difficult. There was thick fog and darkness. That night, Robert tried to keep warm by searching for dry wood. He did find some items and using the matches from his bag, he managed to start a small fire, which helped him survive the cold night. At dawn, Robert tried to find his way back, and after walking for several miles, he found a sign near the top of the Glastonbury Mountain, and this surprised him. He thought that he had camped much closer to his car, but somehow he had ended up 6 or 7 miles away from where he thought he was. On his way back, he passed the same maple tree, but this time the area looked different from what it did yesterday. Luckily, the Vermont State Police and the tracking dog found Robert around 11:30 a.m. He was cold, tired, hungry, and scared, but happy that he was alive. Robert was lucky that he was found alive and he is happy. But unfortunately, the next person wasn't that lucky. Frida Langner. On October 28, 1950, Frida Langner, a 53-year-old woman from North Adams, Massachusetts, went missing in a very strange way. Frida, her husband Max, and her cousin Herbert were on a camping and hunting trip near Somerset Reservoir. What started as a normal day soon turned into a mystery. To know something about Frida, she was an experienced hiker and survivalist. She knew the area very well, and it was impossible that there would be any part of the area that she would not know. That day, Frida and Herbert decided to take a short hike, just a few hundred yards from their campsite. During the walk, Frida slipped and fell into a stream, and her clothes got wet. She told Herbert that the campsite was nearby and she would just quickly go and change her clothes and come back. She asked Herbert to wait on the trail for her. Now Herbert watched as Frida ran off towards the campsite, expecting her to return soon. But Frida never came back. Herbert was getting worried. He had waited for too long, and Frida should have been back by now. When she didn't come, he decided to return to the campsite. He told Max everything that happened, and both of them started searching for Frida. But unfortunately, no one could find her. They immediately contacted the authorities, and a huge search started. There were helicopters, a plane, people joined in. Everyone started searching. Around 50 men, including state troopers and game wardens, started searching the area until night time. The search even continued the next day. There was a fear that Frida may have fallen into the reservoir, which was only 150 feet from the camp. Max was desperate for answers. Frida knew the area very well, so how could she just disappear? 6 months later, on May 12, 1951, Frida's body would unfortunately be found by 2 fishermen near the Somerset Reservoir, about 3.5 miles from their original campsite. What made this discovery even strange was that this area had been searched multiple times when she first disappeared. It was as if she was not there at all before, and unfortunately, her body was so badly decomposed that even a proper autopsy could not be done to find out what actually caused her death. The doctor suggested that maybe she had drowned, but no one was sure. Some people believe that maybe she wandered too far and drowned by mistake, but others think that this situation is too strange. She knew the area very well. She was a survivalist. She knew this place very well. She knew how to take care of herself. She knew how to get back, and the campsite was not even that far away. She could quickly go change her clothes and come back, and there was literally nothing in between. So how did she wander off? Or did something else happen in that short span of time? Unfortunately, we would never know. As heartbreaking as Frida's story is, the next one is even worse because it involves an 8-year-old boy. Paul Jepson. On October 12, 1950, an 8-year-old Paul Jepson, along with his mother, traveled to a landfill in a truck. Now his mother told him that she was going to feed the pigs, and so she asked him to stand near the truck and not go anywhere. By the time she was done feeding the pigs and she came back, she saw that her son was missing. At first, she thought that maybe he was just playing so he could be here somewhere, but as she started searching, she couldn't find him anywhere. She even called out to him, but it was as if he just disappeared. Teams of searchers were organized. Everyone started looking for him. Jepson was said to be wearing a bright red cloth, and it would be very easy for anyone to spot him. Even bloodhounds were brought in so that they could sniff some of his clothes and then try to look for him. But unfortunately, he was never found. Some of the speculations say that maybe he just wandered off and disappeared. Some think that maybe he was kidnapped. But this one theory is the scariest and creepiest of all. That is, some people think that Jepson died at the hands of his parents and became pig food. and that is why no one could ever find him, not even the dogs. But some others also think that the Bennington Triangle might have had something to do with it. The next case involves not one but two people, Fred or Fritz Drum and Thomas Massek Sr. Now, something about this case is that one of them disappeared in the Bennington Triangle, but the other disappeared somewhere far away. But the thing is that both of them disappeared in a very similar way. So let's start with Thomas Massek Sr. In November of 2015, Thomas Massek Sr., an 82-year-old man, went hunting near the Bryant Lake in New York. Thomas was very experienced in the outdoors and he knew the forest very well. By now you can understand that almost everyone who disappeared knew the area very well or knew how to survive in the area. This makes everything all the more scary. Every year he went deer hunting and he was very good at it. The forest was familiar to him and he had spent many years there. But that day, something strange happened. Thomas went into the forest, but he never came back. Now, something about Thomas is that he served in the US Army as a paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne Division. He was 5 feet 10 inches tall and he weighed approximately 160 pounds. He was an experienced hunter and a woodsman, and he knew how to survive. He had been trained for years. The people in his town respected him because he was not just a regular hunter. He had spent many years learning about the survival in the wild, and he even taught other people how to do it. But on that November day, despite knowing the forest so well, he vanished. That was any other day for him. Thomas went hunting with a group of 7 people, including family and friends. They all loved hunting, and they went to a peaceful spot near Lily Pond to enjoy their day. Now the group split into 2 teams. One team was called the drivers and the other was called the watchers. The driver's job was to move through the forest and scare the deers out of the hiding. So the deers would usually be hiding in the forests. The job of the drivers was to walk through the forest and try to scare the deers out, and the job of the watchers was to wait to catch sight of the deer as they ran out. Now Thomas was one of the watchers with 3 men. Now the thing about the watchers was that they were sitting in a straight line, each about 100 yards apart, so they could see and hear each other. They were very careful to stay close and communicate as they watched for the deer. Now Thomas was an experienced hunter in his 80s and had faced many health challenges over the years. He had lost an eye in an accident with an explosive device in his early 20s. He had poor vision, limited hearing, and a history of heart problems. He had also recovered from a case of shingles and almost decided to skip the trip this year, but somehow got into it. Now the spot that they were in was a well-known area for hunting and fishing since the late 1800s. He was last seen around 10 a.m., but when the group returned to the meeting spot, Tom was gone. There was no trace of him, his belongings, or even any deer. He had been wearing duck boots, camouflage clothes, gloves, and his favorite red and black checkered hat, along with carrying a rifle and a walkie-talkie. His friends desperately searched for him and even called the forest rangers. The search began at 4:30 p.m. and lasted until midnight. But Tom had disappeared. Now the drivers had noticed that as they walked through the woods, everything was strangely quiet. There seemed to be no sounds of birds or animals, no footsteps, nothing. It was as if they were all alone, very quiet. So when Thomas disappeared, this all became even more scary. The next day, 13 park rescue workers joined, and the search grew to include over 300 people, including volunteers and trained professionals. They used search dogs, divers, and even helicopters to look over the area. But they still couldn't find anything. Even the FBI came to help them which was even strange because why would the FBI come for a single missing person? But despite all the search, it was as if Thomas had simply vanished into thin air. Some think that maybe an animal was responsible, some even think that there could have been a creature in the forest which was unknown to anyone. The most shocking part of all was that Thomas was very well trained in what he was doing. He knew the place very well and he had a walkie-talkie with him. He could have easily used the walkie-talkie and contacted the others. So why didn't he? His wife would later say in an interview, quote, "The FBI told me something isn't right with this case, but they don't know what. They won't share any theories if they have them. The FBI said until they make a discovery, they are never going to know." In another interview, she said, quote, "He's been in the woods since he was a boy, and if he got lost, he would have cut a piece of his jacket and tied it to a tree and done the other things he learned. The only thing that I can think of is that maybe someone came by in a quad, hurt him, got scared, and drove him out of there. I keep praying they'll find him, so we have some closure. I keep worrying that I didn't tell him I loved him the last day I saw him alive." End quote. As heartbreaking it is to know what happened to Thomas, even more is that of what happened to Frederick or Fritz Trum. Fritz was a 68-year-old man who disappeared from his farm in New York. Fritz is the one whose town is near the Bennington Triangle. He lived on a large farm with his wife Ruth, and they had a peaceful life together. They loved the outdoors and were known to spend time outside, exploring and tracking animals. It was Thanksgiving morning on November 24, 2015, when Ruth Trum left her husband at their Saratoga home and went to her grandparents for breakfast. She would say, quote, "He wasn't there when I got back. We still have no clue what happened. He just seemed to evaporate." End quote. Fritz was said to be a very respected man in his community, having served on the city council for 14 years. People trusted him and admired him for his fair decisions. He was in good health and didn't seem to have any memory loss or any other health problems. The day that Fritz disappeared began like any other. He and Ruth had their morning coffee, then Ruth left to attend a family breakfast. Fritz stayed at the farm, but when Ruth got back at 2 p.m., Fritz was gone. His phone and car keys were still in the house, which suggested that he didn't leave the property. As night fell and Fritz didn't return, Ruth started to get worried. The next morning, she reported him missing, and a large search began. This was exactly like what happened with Thomas. They found no signs of Fritz, and no one knows what happened to him. Over 200 volunteers began their search. They used search and rescue teams, helicopters, and search dogs to look for them. They searched through Fritz's farm and over 1,200 acres around it. Both Fritz and Thomas were experienced outdoorsmen who were well known and respected in their community. Both of them disappeared in places that they knew very well, and so did the people around them. Both of them did not leave any trace behind. The place that Fritz lived is very close to the Bennington Triangle, the place which is well known for strange disappearances, and that's why many people connected Fritz's disappearance to that. But what about Thomas? There was no sign of struggle in either cases and no sign of foul play. No one knows if these both men wanted to leave or didn't. Both of them were very happy. Both of them had ideas of what they wanted to do that day. Many have speculated that there could be some possibility of some paranormal powers behind what's happening. The most popular thinking is that of an UFO. But I'll not go too deep into it. You let me know what you think. Others think that there might be a serial murderer who might have been responsible for all these missing cases. Because remember, the most popular missing cases were between 1945 and 1950. So it is possible that there might have been one person who is behind all of this. Usually, when the police think that there might be a serial killer involved, they try to find out what the serial killer might be looking for. The victim's ages, genders, any type of pattern. But if you see the number of cases that I covered today, none of them seem to be matching with each other, except for the last two, of course. But those two did not even live close to each other. So that's why the police did not pursue the serial killer theory. Many others think that maybe there was a native mountain cat like a lynx, bobcat, or a cougar that killed the vanished people with its claws. Now, mountain lions have not been genuinely observed since around 1940, although bobcats and lynx are not known to be violent towards people. So could it be possible that there was any other animal? What do you think about this theory? What do you think about these cases? Do you think an animal is involved? Do you think a serial killer is involved? Or do you think that something paranormal is happening? How is it possible that so many people are just disappearing into thin air with nothing left behind? No clue, no sign, nothing. And about the one person who managed to survive, he also had no idea what happened to him. So let me know in the comments what do you think, and also let me know if you want me to do a part 2, because there are many more wild cases like this. A big thank you to all my fellow listeners who have been listening and supporting this episode. Your reviews, your listens mean a lot. If you love this episode, if you love the stories that I put out, then please do leave a rating on whichever podcasting platform you're listening from. It would really mean the world to me. Other than this, I also have a YouTube and an Instagram page. I'll link it in the description. Do check it out. I have different stories on Instagram, and I'm planning to put out some short horror stories on YouTube. So do subscribe to my YouTube channel and stay tuned. I am also an author, love fiction stories. If you want to check out my free fiction book, I'll link it in the description. I'll also link my other account in the description where I talk about fiction writing, travel, and I also will soon start sharing fiction stories. So stay tuned. So do follow me there. Thank you so much for everything. That's all for this week. Stay kind, stay safe, and see you next week.